Hi, welcome to episode 124 of the Brewgooders, the League of Beer and Comics. We're going to drink some beer, we're going to chat some comics, and we're also super duper lucky to have another amazing guest with us this week. I'm Jeff. I should be joined by David, but he's had to disappear for a moment, and we'll maybe get Andrew here in a wee while as well. But yeah, we're massively privileged and honoured to be joined by Jason Starr, who is an international best-selling author of over 20 crime novels, psychological thrillers, and comics. If you want to check out his stuff, his novels include Cold Color, The Follower, Panic Attack, Lights Out, Hard Feelings, The Pack, The Craving, and Fugitive Red. Obviously, for those that are tuning in to get their comics fix, they'll be interested in Jason Starr, or they probably already know that Jason has worked in comics for both Marvel and DC, and includes characters such as the Punisher, Ant-Man, Wolverine, the Avengers, Doc Savage, and Batman. His original novels include The Chill, done by Vertigo, brought out by Vertigo, The Returning by Boom Studios, Red Border by AWA, and Casual Fling from AWA. He's also the author of 2 official Gotham novels based on the Fox TV show, and he wrote Ant-Man Natural Enemy, which was the official tie-in novel to the Marvel blockbuster film Ant-Man. So yeah, loads of stuff, loads of things being optioned by other studios, a really concise and very detailed about me section on his website, which is always really helpful. And yeah, just a really awesome human. I'm really glad to bring him on. I should say me and Andrew are really glad to bring on Mr. Jason Starr.
How are you doing?
Hi, Jason.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Does it look a little dark here? I think I'm. I tried to set up my home studio here, but
no, you look lovely. So yeah,
it looks like a hostage video. Like someone's going to come up behind me.
I'm enjoying because I'm right in thinking you're joining us from New York, Jason.
As you can tell.
Well, yeah, exactly. You've got your Yankees hat on, but also, unless Andrew's not telling me something, I also felt like I heard an NYPD police car in the background there as well, which I think is a first for the podcast.
Yeah, there's a bit more crime in New York these days than pre-COVID. It's a little like the 1970s again.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Sure, no.
It does add for the ambience, the New York ambience, some ambulances and police activity outside.
Okay.
That's pretty awesome.
My idea of the 1970s is down to those Charles Bronson movies. There's New York in the 1970s, you know. That one
there's an Italian restaurant down the block for me on here on the Upper East Side that was robbed last week, like right broad daylight, Super Bowl Sunday, with a gun. Somebody came in, tied up the workers, went to the safe. Yeah, that used to happen a lot, like in the 70s and 80s, but not recently.
No, it's not very much a cleaned up city these days, but yeah.
Just I've never been to New York. I don't know if you have, Andrew, but it strikes me as like from sort of we're in like this, like a, I don't know, about a 30-minute train ride away from Edinburgh. So we're in the outskirts. We're in the outskirts of one of our biggest cities, but compared to New York, like New York in my mind is just like, I mean, that's where the Avengers defended the universe. It's where it's where the Ghostbusters were stopping ghosts. It's
the size thing. There's just no comparison. I think Edinburgh's probably smaller than whatever the smallest borough of New York is. It's like 250,000 people or something like that.
Is that right? Yeah. I've been to Glasgow, but not to Edinburgh.
Yeah, Glasgow's bigger.
Glasgow's bigger,
bigger, but not as nice.
Our kind of claim to fame now is that Glasgow is effectively Gotham in the DCEU. So that all the sort of exterior outdoor shots for a lot of for most of the DCEU films are happening there at the moment.
I could see that. It has like that. Yeah, that sort of vibe.
I think I was in a bar in the West End, which is where a lot of in Glasgow's were quite certainly the street and the bar I was drinking is LGBT friendly, and most of them have and I was So I was in this place and I liked them on Facebook, and the week afterwards they were posting loads and loads of photos of Batman on the Batcycle driving past their door, and they're like, "Think he'll come in?" So that was pretty cool. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Andrew. Missed this part, but we had to twist just before we went to air. We had to twist Jason's arm a wee bit, but he has gone and got a beer.
Yeah, I did.
It's probably considerably earlier. I think it was only about 4 o'clock or something like that.
It's a little early here, yeah. But for you guys, I'll do it. I mean, I have to.
That's a massive compliment. What beer did you go and run and get?
I mean, I can't be on this podcast without a beer.
No, it's beer and comics. It's what we do. It's a release on Edinburgh. So,
hey, what beer did
I
you
have
pick
a Sapporo, actually.
Oh, fucking
a Japanese beer, is it?
A Japanese beer, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
I usually, I guess I usually have Stella's probably my favorite. My go-to beer usually.
Like Stella, it's a little strong.
I'm drinking a lot of Corona just to be in the spirit of the times.
And it got cheaper for the last couple of years for a reason as well. Like,
yeah,
it's a branding issue.
It's a branding issue, definitely. Yeah.
What about you? What do you?
I picked up this. Talk about Edinburgh actually. This Edinburgh Beer Factory, which is a brewery in Edinburgh, who pardon my pronunciation. I should probably know this more much, but it's called Palazzi. So it's a lager, but it's in tribute to Eduardo Palazzi, who's sort of often credited as being the inventor of pop art. So there's quite a lot of, obviously the can art pays its sort of tribute, and I think a lot of Edinburgh Beer Factory stuff is kind of similarly branded, but also the statues and some of his art are like in Edinburgh. So it's quite cool. Really, just quite a nice beer to grab. 5.2%, but really fresh. Just really nice smooth lager. It's cool.
I hope they're sponsoring the show.
What's that?
I hope they're sponsoring your show.
I hope so.
Beers every single week, and if we could get them to sponsor the show for us, that really would be a dream come true. But I don't think.
We've got a couple of breweries that are friends with us, but we've not quite got to sponsorship like influencing yet. I've been drinking a lot of Stella this week. A friend at work bought me was cleaning out his garage and asked if I wanted a Krups, which is Krups were like a coffee. Somebody told me, reliably informed me this week, that Krups is they used to be like really influential in like German industrial like days, but they now make coffee machines and beer machines. So somebody gave me their Krups beer dispenser. I've been drinking loads of Stella out of it. It's like called the Perfect Pint, and it just like it's designed so that you can have like pub level beer in your house, which is amazing.
You need a Brewgooders brand. Like your own label.
Well, we do. We brewed locally last year. That was pretty smart. But we had a beer called Speech Bubble, which was quite good. Which was good fun to make. It was just good fun to watch Andrew with like the big pan mixing up all the porridge. It was cool. What are you drinking, Andrew?
I am drinking 12 Cents IPA from Alwa. Oh yeah, it's a William.
Bros. Their stuff's really good, and obviously, complaints to it anyway.
It's decent. It's quite a dark.
Yeah,
quite a dark IPA. Usually, it's a wee bit lighter and a wee bit hazier, but it's not unpleasant. 5.6 volume. Again, slightly stronger than I'm used to. I think I prefer to be on a Thursday night when I'm working. I prefer to be around about the 4.5.
5.6. That is pretty strong.
Yeah.
If you had Belgian beer, that's like really 2 of those. You could be pretty wasted.
You should try one of our speech bubble, the one that we made.
Well, it's there. It's in the background there.
It's right in the background, and it's 7.1.
Wow. Yeah, I've had
it's absolute crazy stuff. I save that for special occasions. So.
The Trappist beer from Belgium. It's like I think it's like 9 point something.
Yeah, Yeah, you get them. I think I said this when I was in Inverness, at the Black Isle bar, and they've got different beers, and they get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think their strongest one, I think it's like 12%, but they'll only sell quarter pints of it. They won't sell you a pint of it. They only sell quarter pints, and then I think they cut you off at 2. So,
sort of. I remember going there and thinking I was being like, oh, I should be allowed to choose, but yeah, it would be anarchy to assume that anybody gets.
Paul's trying to tell me that it's 550,000 for Edinburgh, but that's probably Greater Edinburgh. That probably takes into account Musselburgh.
Is that what he's referring to? Is that the population of Edinburgh, Paul?
I'm assuming so.
No, I assumed that it was a Palazzi dig, and I hadn't clocked it. I assumed he had a piece of work called that. That's Thank you, Paul. I first became aware of your work, Jason, having picked up Red Border and fallen in love with it, and then I can't quite remember how it happened, but you and I were in a same Twitter conversation. And I was like, that's Jason Starr. So I reached out to you and was totally amazed that you were quite. So I'm really, once again, really, really thankful that you're joining us. It's absolutely amazing to have you on the show. I wanted to talk about your career is quite illustrious. It's like you're not just a comic creator. Right? Would I be right in saying that like you sort of your first sort of love of sort of the creative arts is your crime novels?
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, actually, I started off writing plays. Actually, when I was in college, really is when I first started writing. Basically, because when I started to write short stories, I had a lot of dialogue, and they were entirely dialogue-driven stories. So I thought, well, maybe I should be writing plays. So I got involved with the theater department at my college, and then. Yeah, like I really like playwriting and theater and just like seeing actors perform your work. So then, like in my 20s, like I started writing novels again, and started reading a lot of crime fiction. I think that's what really inspired me. A lot of noir crime writers from the 50s, people like James M. Cain and Jim Thompson and Raymond Chandler, and definitely the hard-boiled writers. I mean, I'd always been a big reader, not only plays, but I was classic literature. But it was really the crime fiction that got me into it, and then reading Elmore Leonard and Patricia Highsmith got me into like the idea of like, well, maybe I should be writing novels, but I don't think I was really ready to write a novel like when I was in college. Like I said, like I was writing mainly dialogue. I don't think my writing was really strong enough to write a novel. So I think it just took a lot of reading crime novels and reading the books I like to read, and then eventually I just started. I had a lot of part-time jobs, but I was always writing and working on books. And Cold Caller, my first novel that was published actually in the UK by No Exit Press, was my first book. And it wasn't really like I think with many writers, like the first book that's published is not the first book that you wrote. That's my new cover for it.
That's lovely.
So it was actually probably my second or third book that I'd actually written. Became my first novel. It was the first published novel. And then after that, I've been able to publish, books pretty consistently over the years. Like I said, my first book was published in the UK, and then so it's like it was an unusual path for a American writer to get published in the UK first. But I was published in the UK, and then my books were published in German next, and I still have the same German publisher, Diogenes, who's been publishing me for years now. And then the books were sold back to the US. It was a very roundabout way of getting my first book published here. And then I didn't really write comics until maybe about 10 years, maybe 10, 15 years ago, with the first time, like when I wrote an introduction to, I think it was, what was the first thing I did? I think it was for Brian Azzarello's 100 Bullets for Vertigo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the editor had read some of my books and asked me to write an introduction, and that was like the beginning. Like I'd already been getting back into comics because I was aware of like what Brian was doing and Ed Brubaker and writers like that in crime comics, and but that got me back into it and into conversations and about writing comics, and then I had an opportunity to write a graphic novel for Vertigo, and then I started doing some stuff for DC, and Ed Brubaker helped me get involved at Marvel. So it was a circuitous path to getting into comics. And I think every comics writer I met has had no one's had the same story for how they got involved in working with comics. Some people started out writing in comics. Some people like me were writing novels first or writing screenplays. Some people started doing web comics. Like there's no real set way to do it, it seems.
We had Andrew Wildman on a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you've ever come across Andrew Wildman, but he it's just an interesting, like they say that like you're saying you'd gone from your route into comics because he'd got his start in comics in the sort of the late 80s, drawing for Marvel, obviously drawn for other publishers and then getting picked up by Marvel. And then he went into he's a screenwriter for television and has been working on like Doctor Who and Luther and things like that. And then go back into comics. So it's just it's really interesting just to hear, like you say, like hearing how different people have gone from one art to the other is quite amazing. I also think it's really interesting. What I think quite interesting about some of your work is that you do novelizations of comic book movies and comic book TV programs, which is really interesting. How does that?
Yeah, also similar. So I've done some novels for Hard Case Crime, which is part of Titan Book, which is in the UK based. Actually, they're publishing my new novel, The Next Time I Die, which is coming out in June in the UK and in the US. Anybody could pre-order it right now. It's up at all bookshops. But amazing. I've done 5 books with Hard Case Crime, and they also do the tie-in. They were doing the tie-in novels to the Gotham TV show. Titan was. So so an editor approached me about doing the tie-in novels, which seemed, I'm always up for a challenge, and it's definitely a different type of writing as opposed to like writing a novel or working on the show itself, because it's definitely different from writing an original novel in the sense that you have to immerse yourself in this other world that's not your own. So I had to like really become, in a very short amount of time, like a total expert on the Gotham TV show, like the Bible for the show, but also just to like watch every episode multiple times and like really get to know the way the characters talk and understand the characters. I think that's the key to adapting anything, whether it's working on a licensed comic, like when I was working on Wolverine, for example. You have to immerse yourself in the character and really understand. Like, to me, it's always understanding the attitude of the character is the key. Like, if you understand Wolverine's attitude or the Punisher's attitude, then I feel like you could just take that character into any situation, and the plot and story like flows out of understanding the attitude of the character. So I really had to get to know the Gotham characters well, and the Gotham books I had to write under much tighter deadlines than I'm used to for my novels. And I also had to liaison with the writers of the show to make sure I wasn't doing anything that they wanted to do, especially that they wanted to do in a forthcoming season, that I wasn't going to give away anything. So it required a lot more plotting then I would probably, and sharing my plotting. Like I do a lot of plotting to begin with, but I usually don't have conversation after conversation with editors about what I'm going to write when I'm writing a book. So for the Gotham books, I totally did. Like you have to really, and the same thing for Ant-Man. Like you have to make sure like you're not doing something that they're doing or doing something that they don't want to do.
I was going to ask, so how much of a legacy? I don't know if that legacy is the right word. When you do a piece of like, how much when you're working for like a major company or something that's got an established narrative already, how much of a legacy are you allowed to leave, or were you allowed to leave? And what I mean by that is like, are you allowed to just introduce new ideas? Or are you told that by the end, whatever you do by the end of the medium, you need to be at this point because that's what's going to happen, that's going to follow on? Or
well, it was different. Like my two experiences were with Ant-Man and with doing the Gotham books. Ant-Man, I probably had a little more leeway than with the Gotham books. The Ant-Man, they wanted, they weren't that specific about where the book took place. The movie was in San Francisco. I set my book in New York. His daughter Cassie is a young child in the first Ant-Man movie, and in my movie, she's a teenager. My Ant-Man, so it's a different universe than the Marvel movies. It was tying in the sense that we released the book at the exact same time that the movie came out. So it was sort of a tie-in companion piece to the movie, but it wasn't following the storyline. If anything, it's probably similar. I think I've seen some readers and fans say that it's a sort of a cross between the universe of the comic and the movie. What I did, so which is probably true. But so I set it in New York. I made Cassie a teenager, and as far as like setting up the storyline, I had to get it approved by the editors at Marvel and also probably the people involved in the movie as well. But there wasn't a lot of things like I couldn't do. Like I would say the one thing I couldn't do.
I was going to ask, like, what were you told off for?
Yeah, this was actually. Like they said, the temptation is, as one editor said to me, is writers always want to play with the toys too much at Marvel because you have access to all of these iconic characters, Marvel characters. So it is tempting to want to insert, the Hulk into the book, even if he doesn't belong, or other characters. So I was able to have Iron Man appear. Who else? Just some references to like some X-Men characters, but they didn't let me go too crazy with that. Like I couldn't like. That's one thing they were concerned about. Like that's not like
why Scarlet Witch in the supermarket queue.
They didn't want that. No, with the Gotham, it was completely different because the first Gotham book is a prequel to the show. So actually, anybody who hasn't seen the Gotham TV show yet could actually read my book before even watching the show, because the last page of the book is actually the exact same dialogue as the beginning of the TV series. So it was an interesting way of having to plot a book. Like I knew that the ending was really going to be the beginning of the show. So so obviously no spoilers here, because everyone knows the story, but young Bruce Wayne witnesses the killing of his parents. So my novel was an opportunity to go back and tell the story of his parents, so that did become part of like the canon for Gotham, I guess, because like his parents were actually characters leading up to the events that happened in season 1. And then the other book I wrote, City of Monsters, took place between season 2 and season 3 of the show, when Strange releases all the monsters onto the streets of Gotham. And then when season 3 starts, the monsters were gone, and there was a short explanation that Gordon had become a bounty hunter during his exile from the Gotham Police Department, and he was responsible for hunting down the monsters, but that was never shown. So my book was about that gap, about Gordon hunting down monsters. So I had a lot of leeway in the sense that I could do whatever I wanted with those monsters because they weren't really described, so I could just invent whatever I wanted to do. But I still had to begin and end at a certain point. Bruce Wayne, for example, during season 2 and season 3 is away in Switzerland, and there was really no explanation for what his life in Switzerland was at. So I had a whole subplot about what was going on in Switzerland, with Bruce Wayne during that time. So that gives me leeway. I could create a whole story where someone's out to kill him in Switzerland, and he and Alfred have to get out of that situation. So it's sort of backing into a story, which was fun to do, but you had to use a lot of much different writing muscles than I normally use for when I'm writing my own novels.
Because you're having to deal with characters that are already created and very fleshed out. So, in some ways, the characters are there. I think whenever I read, and I read a lot of crime fiction and stuff like this, a lot of the first, third of the book is introducing the character. You have to make the character likable. You have to make the characters relatable. Your characters are already built. It must have been great for a storyteller.
It's good to have there are pros and cons. It's good to have the characters fleshed out already, in the sense that, maybe it's a little easier just to get into the story or just put them into a storyline. I think the harder part is, especially when it's an iconic character that everyone knows really well, like Batman, or when I was writing the Wolverine comics, just a similar thing. I'm taking an existing character and giving them a story. Obviously, the fans have their own ideas about everything that's happened in the past with the character. So there's all that baggage that you have to think about, that you don't have to think about when you're writing. When I'm writing my own books, I don't have to worry about that because I'm starting with a clean slate. Yeah. But most of the stuff I've done, even in comics or these situations we're talking about, has been in situations where I really had the leeway to have my own universe. The Wolverine books take place in the Max universe, so I didn't have to stick to any particular origin story because there was none for the Max version. That's why I made him a loner. I actually changed stuff in his history. I went back to the 1800s, and or actually it was it late early 1900s, but I had to decide when he how also Weapon X, did he get his claws the same way? I was only allowed to do 15 issues, but if I went further, I had another explanation or some possible explanations for how he actually got his claws and what happened.
Yeah. So the good thing about the Marvel Universe, I suppose, is they keep all these universes separate. Their Max Universe, their Ultimate Universe, their Standard Universe, and they call them different ones. And they're quite happy to have different stories and different backgrounds and different histories. And that gives writers this massive carte blanche to do something a bit different with the character.
Yeah. So it's a lot different than if I came in, I was writing Spider-Man, and I came in on, number 800. And or 7. I don't know, what are they up to now? What number are they?
They're nearly 1,000, I think.
Yeah. But if I came in so obviously there'd be so many before in the Amazing Spider-Man that I would have to really make sure I didn't do something that was done before or alter something. I think that's I think that's a different type of challenge. The writers who do that are very good at that research and going back and making sure they get everything right.
Yeah, you've got to respect in a title that's been running non-stop since the 1960s. you have to respect whatever the history of it is, I suppose. Yeah.
I suppose also like with the sort of, I don't know, as a total comic book and movie geek, part of me is always like I don't know if anyone caught this week's Doctor Strange trailer, but like they're playing around with the idea that like what varying timelines and the fact that there's different iterations of the same character can exist in the same. So I don't know.
They started Spider-Man, and it's going to be their method of bringing in the characters that they've just bought into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Do you think Max Universe could be part of that, or does it not fit the Disney aesthetic? Or?
Well, I think no offense, man, but you've already seen Charlie Cox in Spider-Man, and the Netflix Punisher show is probably as close to the Max Universe as they've put on screen. Yeah, it was hugely influenced by the Punisher Max runs. So, yeah,
I would totally agree with that. I think that's the most. To me, that was the most accurate Max.
Yeah.
The Punisher.
Well, you could see elements of Garth Ennis' story in that. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I obviously love the Max books, and I kind of wish they were continuing doing them. But
yeah.
I was going to ask about so at what point so I discovered you more through it, like sort of AWA. We're big fans of John Lee's on this podcast, and so obviously he's had what he's been doing Hotel and the Crimson Cage and stuff like that through AWA.
Oh yeah.
Just a really exciting new publishing house, and obviously I came across Red Border, and it was one of my favorite comics of last year. Absolutely astounding comic, actually. How did the creative process between like working from Marvel and then going to working with some of the smaller independent? Well, they're not, they're smaller in so much as they're not Marvel and DC, I suppose, but they're still bigger than most kind of comic houses. But
well, one of my editors at Marvel, my main editor really was Axel Alonso, who was in charge of the Max line, and then he became editor-in-chief of Marvel when I was there. So I worked with him on everything I did at Marvel, including the Ant-Man novel he was involved with. So then when he was one of the founders of AWA, and so that's how I got involved with AWA, and several other authors got involved with him, in a similar way, because he had worked with them previously at Marvel and other projects. So it's I've done some indie comics before, like I did something at Boom, and I guess Vertigo is sort of creator owned also, but so it's similar to other creator owned stuff, and also a little unique. I guess it's similar to Boom or Image, but the way AWA partly describes it is that, or I don't know if they're still doing this, but this is how it was originally pitched to me, is that it's sort of like it's Major League Baseball, or like a league where there's the league, there's Major League Baseball, and then there's each team, and we're the individual owners of our, we're the creators, and we own the team, but we're part of like Major League Baseball. So they're sort of like this overarching entity to the creators. So it's a slightly different model, but otherwise it is similar, just in the process of pitching projects, working with editors, working with artists. It is similar to other creator-owned stuff I've done. But so it involved. So Red Border came about by pitching Axel on a few ideas, and he connected with this idea of writing a thriller set on the border right now that would deal with issues that are very, very current issues, but not like in a direct way where we take political sides. Like we definitely want it to be, neutral as far as that's concerned. Yeah. But yeah, it like anything else, it started with the story and coming up with the idea of these two characters, Eduardo and Katrina, who are on the run from a cartel in Mexico, and they're in this awful situation. Yeah. And when things like just in great noir fiction, which I love, just when things don't seem like they can get any worse, they do. They get much worse, and they wind up in crossing the border, wind up in a much worse situation than they were in Mexico. And in Mexico, they were in an absolutely horrific situation. So you can imagine how bad this one was going to be.
There was a
line, but it's fun.
There's a line in issue 3 actually that sort of encapsulates that quite beautifully. There's a character who says to quote a character. I don't want to put too many spoilers in because everyone just needs to check this complicated. Sorry, bro, but it looks like the world's even more fucked up than you thought it was. Right. And obviously, by that point in the series, they've the main protagonists have gone through a serious amount of horrible stuff, and then you're like, oh yeah, we're not quite even done yet.
Yeah, I guess that quote sort of epitomizes noir in general. Mm-hmm. There.
Awesome. So, what have you got coming up? What's
well, the other one you mentioned, Casual Fling, is the my new AWA graphic novel that's out right now, and it's in all stores in the US and UK. And I did that with Dalibor, who worked on Hotel, also, and some other AWA comics, and he's done a lot of stuff at Marvel also, and he's also a great artist. I worked with Will Conrad on Red Border, and his stuff is amazing. Very different styles, but great in different ways. So that book is completely different than Red Border. It's a New York-based thriller, probably a little more similar to some of my novels than Red Border is, and it's about a woman who's in a fairly happy marriage. There's some problems, just like any other, fairly normal, identifiable situation. But her husband is a stay-at-home dad, and she's works as a lawyer, and she meets a man, and they have a casual fling, and she thinks it's going to be just one night, and that's it. But I guess similar to Red Border, things don't go quite the way she expects they're going to go, and things also get much worse, but in a much different way. It's much more of a psychological drama. It's really about this family and what her decision does to their marriage, and then ultimately what the agenda is of this guy, this mysterious guy she met, and what he really wants.
My favorite, one of my favorite. I'm just looking at your website just now. One of my favorite sort of review or taglines is that the Hollywood Reporter referred to it as a fatal attraction for the Me Too generation.
That's a good way of describing the.
It's an elevator pitch.
I think the fatal attraction, it's sort of a reversed fatal attraction situation, though, because this woman Jennifer, who's their protagonist, is the sort of the Michael Douglas character. Yeah. She's the one who steps out of the marriage. So we definitely wanted to do a reversal of that sort of story, deal with the gender issues in the reverse, and so it was interesting to just approach the story from a very familiar story from an inside out perspective. And then what I loved about working on is hopefully we take the story in unexpected directions. You might think where it's going after issue 1 and 2, but then issue 3 it goes somewhere completely different, and then issue 4 does as well. So that was something we definitely wanted to do, keep the reader guessing, like making you think, like, okay, I get it. It's sort of like a reverse gender fatal attraction, but then, oh wait, like it's something else.
That's pretty cool. I was watching a program the other day that was talking about movies of the 80s, and they talked about Fatal Attraction quite a lot. And that's like I hadn't really thought about it until I saw it, but that's where that whole the Bonnie Boiler, like that's in like, you know, everyone's language now. You know, like if you find, you know, I'd had an ex-girlfriend who my friends referred to as a Bonnie Boiler, and I had no idea what they were referring to. And I was watching this documentary about I want that's good.
No bunnies are killed in our comic.
Thank you. Thanks.
The reason you didn't get it, Jeff, is because you're too young to remember when that film came out. Because you weren't born. I remember when that film came out and seeing it on VHS, and
So I would like to. I wanted to talk a wee bit about Jason, how so we I like to speak to comic creators and find out who they're reading, and I also like to speak to we also like to speak to creatives and see like what's the feedback been from like friends and colleagues and but also creatives. You know, like I don't know if that's a genuine like sign of quality or whatever, but you know, if there's people that you look up to that are reading your stuff and acknowledging your input, I think that's something that quite a lot, I think, comic writers look for. One of my looking on your website this morning, Lee Child, who everyone knows who Lee Child is, but if you, just in case you don't, the number one New York Times best-selling author of the Jack Reacher series, he's referred to you as being hypnotically good, which is one of the coolest plaudits I think I've ever seen. He says that you're hypnotically good, some of the best new writing there is. What was that like?
Well, I've known Lee for a long time. He's gone to a lot of writers' conferences that I've been at also. So I've read his books for a long time. I know he's read a bunch of my books in the past also. And Ken Bruin and I don't know if you guys know Ken, but he's an Irish writer who writes the Jack Taylor novels. And he and I collaborated on 4 crime novels, 4 hard case crime that we call the Bust series. There's Bust, the Slide, the Max, and Pimp. They're crazy, insane crime novels set in New York, Ireland, Greece, with some extremely eccentric characters, and it has just like a really over-the-top like tone to the whole series. But we have one character, because we sort of like are satirical just about everything in those books. We have one character who is a Lee Child, Sebastian, who's a Lee Child lookalike. Everyone always thinks he's Lee Child. And he was even like forging Lee Child signatures at events and like, so we did. Yeah. And once I did a reading of that book at the Mysterious Bookshop in New York, and Lee came to the reading. He was like in the audience of the reading I was doing. And I planned in advance that like when I got to the Sebastian part, like Lee would get up and start reading with me. So he actually read the part of the Lee Child impersonator character. So that was definitely a highlight.
Oh, that is amazing. I just saw that, and you're like, you can't really say Lee Child.
So for my new book, am I promoting it enough? The next time I
no, you need to promote away, man. Promote.
I keep holding it.
You're holding it back up again.
But I got a great blurb from one of my favorite writers, Ian Rankin.
Amazing.
Yeah, who read this book. So that was great. He compared it to the movie Identity, which I really like. So yeah, that was cool.
Can I just say, I love these novels, these books that you're writing on. They really, it's the covers that get me. You know, I grew up. My dad had loads of these things, and it was always. I became obsessed at one point with like the Robert McGuinness covers and stuff like this. They were absolutely phenomenal, and these books look just like them, just like the pulps from the 50s. I know that's what they're going for.
Yeah, they do. The publisher Charles R. Dye here in New York actually commissions an artist to do the original paintings for each cover. So it's something that's very important to the line. They've done some Stephen King books also, and like some very big bestsellers. And yeah, every book has like a similar sort of pulpy cover. That always, he always specifically wants it to speak to a scene that's in the book. So the process usually is like when he accepts the book and it's getting ready for publication, we try to figure out like what scene should be shown in the book on the cover, that like, and it usually involves like a sexy woman or you know, in the pulp tradition. The pulp tradition. I mean, not in every case, but usually that's a prerequisite. And there was one case, I think, where we actually, in one of the books I did with Ken Bruin, we actually adjusted a scene in the book so we could have like a cool cover. It had to do with like where someone's image is reflective, like in glasses. So like we just in sunglasses, and we described that scene ultimately in the book, so then we could have it on the cover. So sometimes the cover comes from the book, comes from the cover.
Yeah, I think back in the day we would just tell there's a blonde girl and a button private eye, and the cover would bear no resemblance to the story in the book. Like you said, I read a lot of Westlake and things like that back in the day. But they used to do the same in comics. Sometimes the comics back in the 60s and 70s, it would be a different guy working on the comic, and you didn't get to read the story before he did the comic. He was just told, right, such and such is in it, and this one thing happens. Go. So
yeah, I had one like I mean, sometimes they don't reflect like books. Some of my books that were published in other languages. Like I remember there was one Polish cover that was about it was my book Hard Feelings, that's about a computer networking salesman in New York, and it's a very like white collar sort of main character, and there was just like a guy, like a club guy in like Eastern Europe, who has like the shirt open like to his belly button with like chest hair. It has like nothing to do like with the book at all, but like I guess that was selling that year. So
it's interesting. Like I hadn't really thought about it until it's not. I hold my hands up and say like, so crime fiction, and that sort of isn't something that like I've normally choose to pick up. But when you're talking about the covers and the art, I finished Stephen King's Joyland a couple of years.
That's exactly the same kind of pulpy cover.
Yes,
that might even be. Yeah.
Just when you were mentioning it there, I was like, when you were talking about those covers, I was like, oh, actually, I think I know something about this.
I think it's the sort of cover. I mean, it's certainly like. I mean, there might be somebody out there who's going to be like, "Oh, that's such a racy cover." I don't, there might be readers out there, but they certainly have an audience, like a very specific built-in audience. I think Stephen King, for example, like goes well beyond that audience just to get everyone to read the book. So that's why I think he's helped the line considerably, because he's just gotten so many readers to the line, and they'll read that Stephen King book, and then they'll discover other authors.
It was kind of for me like I've read some Stephen King in the past, but sometimes think some of the themes are maybe a wee bit too heavy, or I just I think some of his stories can be so wildly different, that like I find like he's probably there's some writers that I'll buy books just based on their name value, And then I do find myself with Stephen King, despite the fact that he's probably got one of the most bankable names in books. I will find myself like browsing the back of, in fairness, there's not a shortage of his work anyway. But I'll read the back at his covers more than I'll read other ones. But I did buy Joyland because I was like, oh, this is Stephen King doing pulpy like crime. It was really enjoyable. Coming of age, kind of like that kind of stuff. So.
I mean, he's definitely an inspiration and a model for just how he, has able to move around genres. I mean, obviously, I've written horror, like Red Border, action horror. I've written mysteries, crime fiction. This book, The Next Time I Die, is. I
don't think you've seen that yet, Jason.
It's actually a sci-fi. It's a sci-fi novel. It's one of the few sci-fi novels that Hard Case Crime has done, other than Stephen King, Ray Bradbury, Michael Crichton. But I love the way Stephen King has really made, as you just pointed out, like he's the brand, like Stephen King is the brand. So he could take that, and if he feels like doing a crime series or a horror, he could do that. Some other writers, like Lee Child, for example, have just one character. Like he has a Reacher, and every book is a Reacher book, and the brand is Lee Child, but it's really the brand is Reacher.
Well, it's interesting because the brand, I would say, is Reacher. Lee Child doesn't write those books anymore. I think his brother has written the last two of them, because I've read again all of them, and his brother's an accomplished writer in his own right. He's got books, but not anymore.
Andrew. He's written a lot of books. But I think if Lee wanted to, he could write. I'm sure he could take his name and just like write it. If he wanted to write fantasy novels, people would come over with him because he's so big. He's so big at this point. But
that would be pretty cool as well.
Most writers, it is hard to do what Stephen. New York.
It's amazing, man. I love it.
No, don't shoot. No.
Actually, Stephen King did a story about that, where he talked about, you're walking up New York and all you'll hear is somebody shouting, "Put the gun down, Vinny! It's not worth it." Or something. This is just part of New York life,
right? But I think I forgot what I was saying. Steve.
What do you read, Jason? What are your go-to? Like normally about this time of the podcast, we talk about what we've been reading this week. What kind of stuff do you? What are your go-tos in
comics?
Yeah, man, I've been reading a lot of the same AWA books and comics that you guys have been reading. Love Hotel. I mean, I've been reading that.
So good.
There's a new one called Out that I really liked that AWA does. Garth Ennis's new Marjorie Finnegan, like I really like. I've also been reading. I was using it to hold up my laptop, but Hard Case Crime, five Decembers. I read recently. Great crime novel. Sort of like an historical mystery, World War II mystery. Extremely well written by James Castrell, and it's been nominated for an Edgar Award. I read Alison Galen's new book, The Collective, recently, which I thought was really great. So, I mean, a lot of my reading, occasionally I'll read something, some nonfiction or something like that, but mainly comics and crime fiction and thrillers are like my go-tos.
That's cool, man. That's really cool. What have you been reading this week, Andrew?
I picked up a couple of books this week when I was out and about. I'm a big lover of fantasy and comics. So when I seen the first one, The Blade itself, and it's the first volume of. It's a book by Joe Abercrombie. I don't know if you've heard of Joe Abercrombie. He kind of calls himself Lord Grimdark, and he's the Canadian. Along with a couple of other guys, along with like Scott Lynch and that, he's sort of the father of, and I suppose George R.R. Martin. He's like one of the fathers of modern gritty fantasy. This is a great book. It's one of the best realised characters in fantasy. Is a character in this called Logan Ninefingers, who's a kind of Viking-style Northman, trying to make his way in a civilized world. But he has these berserker rages that come on him every now and again, and becomes this unstoppable force. And there's a bit of magic in it, and a bit of luck and stuff like that. And it's phenomenal. The writing's it's Joe Abercrombie's writing, obviously, but the artwork's pretty decent. Picked that up this week, and also because I loved it as a kid, and I couldn't even say no. I picked up Battle of the Planets.
Oh, amazing! Oh man, I need to get that off you.
and I opened this up, and my absolute, as people will tell you when they're in here, my absolute favourite artist in comics is Alex Ross. It's just such a thing, and he did some of this artwork for it. He did the cover art for these things. This one's not Alex Ross. This one's Alex Ross.
Yeah.
But it's brilliant. I absolutely loved this show when I was a kid, and I still do. You can still watch it. You can catch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing because you can watch the American version and the Japanese version subbed, and you realise that the story's completely different. They didn't have any idea what was going on. They just took bits of the thing and chopped it up and reintroduced new characters and did a wee bit more work. So yeah, that's the two books that I picked up this week that I've been enjoying.
I was watching I was telling you, like, obviously me and Andrew and Colin, Jason have been like playing around with our own sort of comic booky idea that we're maybe going to try and co-write and get out.
We cannot say it online.
We can't say it. But I was talking about No, sorry, no, I won't, because if it doesn't happen, then. But like I've been watching, just through a conversation that we had in the pub. I've been rewatching. I don't know, and nobody watched this, and I'm annoyed that nobody watched it because it was brilliant. But it was called Megas XLR, and it was a cartoon on, I want to say Cartoon Network or Toonami or one of these sort of affiliates, and it was about a robot that like crashed through time. It was a giant mech that crashed through time, and then it was discovered in a junkyard by a guy that was trying to find new components for his convertible car, and he essentially just like makes his car the cockpit of this mech. And it's a really good show, and you can catch it on YouTube as well. But there's an episode where like they lampoon the Battle of the Planets, where they come to Earth because they think Megas is a baddie, because when he's trying to like save Earth, he blows stuff up constantly and he makes too much of a mess. So they assume that he's the main baddie, and it just becomes a total lampoon of, like I say, Battle of the Planets, Power Rangers, all these kind of, where like he basically smashes their robots and then uses them to like make boxing gloves out of, and like a coat and stuff like that. And it's just cool. I love that sort of stuff, man.
I'm a great believer that if you hadn't had Battle of the Planets in its animated form, you wouldn't have Power Rangers. The Power Rangers came out along about five or so years later, the first iteration, live action, but they couldn't quite do what Battle of the Planets did because it was live action.
So I have a question for you guys. What's your process for writing a book together, like a comic together? Like how are you?
Jeff's a writer. I own a comic shop. That's my sort of connection. I do a bit of writing, but not generally comics. I'm trying to write a comic story for something that we've got going on, and it's a completely different. As you're probably aware, to write in long form fiction or short story, it's like it's a different world. It's completely different.
Right.
You have to be so much tighter, I think, as a comic writer to get images down. You can't just I'll meander and take.
You have to stick to those.
Yeah,
I think we're really lucky in our. I wouldn't go so far as to say we're a writing team yet, because we've not quite got there. But our other co-host, who Colin, or one of our other co-hosts, Colin, he's quite an established comic writer. He writes for Commando Comics in Scotland, and Willy and things like that. And he's a total professional as well. And I think when we've been throwing ideas around, Colin's quite good at like taking all the ideas, and he seems to be one. He seems to be the one putting it to paper. So if
we get going, he's going to be the editor. He's definitely there. Are you
I think
watching?
that's how we'll do it. I think that's how we'll do it. And yeah, he's not very well just now. Everyone needs to give Colin a love, but we'll hopefully have him back next week.
We've got Dave as well, who's the other guy who's not been here, unfortunately. He's also like becoming an established comic writer as a young lad, doing his first.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to plug here is
plug.
I'm teaching. I also teach in a MFA program, a master's program at St. Francis College in Brooklyn, and we just started. We think not only the country's first, but the world's first MFA program where you can get a master's degree in comics and graphic novels. And I'm teaching the workshops. So if there's anyone out there who's interested in learning to write comics, having an opportunity to liaison with editors, artists, it would be.
Is it an online course?
Francis College, Brooklyn, MFA.
Is it an online course?
There's information on my website, on my Twitter, so just check it out.
Well, we'll also send some stuff to you, Jason, as well, because we've got there's a university in Scotland that I think does comic related.
In Dundee, but that's more comic history rather than.
We've got a comic history program in Dundee. It'd be pretty cool. Imagine that would be of interest to you. Obviously, Dundee in Scotland.
I'll check it out.
Was it? Colin calls it. It's like the 3 J's that came out of Dundee were. I put myself on the spot. So I had Jute something in journalism is the DC Thompson that runs like some of like Britain's most successful comics, like the Beano and the Dandy, and that comes from there. And they've got a comics history program.
I'll check it out.
So we're kind of. I've not talked about what I read this week because I'd lent it to a friend, my next door neighbour, because I really, really enjoyed it. And then was like, I actually had to get it back because I got it back on Monday because I knew Jason was joining us. I reread Red Border, and in preparation for Jason joining us, and I forgot how much I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, we've talked about it already, but Jason Starr, Will Conrad, and Ivan Nunes have put together this. It's just really good. It's two Mexican. A Mexican couple who are trying to cross the border into the States because something horrible's happened, and the cartel's after them, and they are rescued on the border through quite brutal circumstances by a Texan man who offers them shelter and offers them food and somewhere to stay safe and recuperate and get ready for the next part of their journey. But the longer they spend there, the more they realize things are not what they seem, and there's a palpable tension. We talked about that sort of the style of certain writers to create and maintain just an uneasiness that I think this must be obviously, Jason, where a lot of your sort of crime fiction background comes from, but you do spend. I did spend periods of Red Boulder reading it like that, and you don't really get that often with comics where you're like, where you're like, no, you need to move on. Just go. It's fine. That slow build and that tension that just sort of permeates the pages, and then bang, it happens, and then bang, it happens again, and it's just really it's marvelous. And I think comics are overlooked in that genre. We're so used to like slow burn movies or novels where the comics do it just as effectively and sometimes much more so. So anybody that wants to try something, wants to have a wee fright and wants to just kind of enjoy themselves, you should really check out Red Border.
Yeah, for that comic, thank you. Well, for that comic, we really wanted the pace to be really fast. That was what it was. I wanted it to be. You start off literally running,
yeah,
right from the beginning, and basically just running nonstop until the end of issue 4. So in that sense, like, it was really more of like an action thriller than anything I've done before, because usually my books are, and my comics are very psychological, and I'm trying to get into the heads of the characters, and the darkness comes from inside. Here, there's a lot of external darkness and danger for the characters, and the world is like, just in my mind, it just feels like it's like this big space that we're operating in. And Will did, like, that artwork, like, is incredible, I think, in Red Border. Like, just like the way he can get like expressions from characters, and I mean, some of just like the detail, also the coloring, like the shots of those headlights on like a dark road, like some shots that in some comics just might be a throwaway panel, have like incredible detail, and I think that the art like just like elevated it like to another level.
Me. Well, there's an example of that where you're seeing that lighting effect on the
like that
issue 3. But there's I mean, it happens throughout where characters are running away or towards lights, and there's an uncertainty of whether that'll be a positive or negative thing for them, because ultimately it comes down to this the story. How I felt when I read it comes down to it's the story of these two protagonists and them trying to like. And obviously, their relationship is really strained throughout this experience as well. So, like, they're trying to look out for each other, but at the same time, like, their experiences are causing a friction that's making that even. You know what I mean? They're together because they have to be at that moment in time in their life, not because they're necessarily choosing to be. And it's, I just thought it was really good. I thought it was interesting what you were saying there about the sort of like the fast pace of it, because actually, I kind of felt reading it that like anytime the characters slow down, it's when something bad happens. You know what I mean? When they're at pace and they're on the move, things are in their corner a wee bit more. You know what I mean? That's where they're straight.
That is a good point. Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyable, and everyone should check it out. I think I got that from my local comic book shop in Dunfermline.
Yeah, there's a graphic novel now with all the 4 issues collected. In
marvelous.
One volume. Yeah.
That's awesome. From AWA again, like pulling in some incredible writers like yourself to do some really great work. Like you said earlier, Hotel's incredible as well. So we're a bit biased because John Lees is a friend of the podcast already. But I don't know, Jason, did you ever read Sync? That was it was put out by Comic Tribe.
No, I haven't read that one.
That was John Lees's sort of, it's a sort of anthology series set in a fictional suburb of Glasgow. And
check that out.
If you enjoyed, just when you saying you enjoyed Hotel, like when my friend Colin gave it to me, he literally said, "This is just the best comic ever," and he was like, I can't say more than that. You just need to go off and try it. And it's just if you've seen your like Hotel, it's John Lees, it's the same writer.
And Crimson Cage, that was the one I was thinking.
Yeah. It's a Macbeth, but with pro wrestling.
Yeah.
What are you digging for, Andrew?
Yeah,
I was just going to go out issue of Sync, but yeah.
Mine's are all upstairs.
It's in the box here somewhere.
But yeah, before we shoot off, as I say, we're normally about 75 minutes ish on the podcast. Has anyone got anything else they wanted to chat about that happened in the world of comics or beer this week?
Have you guys? Are you planning to go into any Comic-Cons this year?
In 2 weeks, we're at Acme Comic Con in Glasgow. It'll be my first Comic Con in more than 2 years. Since probably the middle of the year before the world went crazy. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
People should check it out. The guest list looks phenomenal, including we're obviously funny because we're sharing like screenshots that we find. But like SoCal Val's going to be there, I'm a pro wrestling fan, and SoCal Val is a valet and ring announcer for multiple companies across the world. So like there was a funny moment last night where one of the boys in our Brewgooder group chat shared the guests. It was like, and there was SoCal Val and somebody else, and I was like, I love SoCal Val. How about you, Jason? Have you got anything coming up?
Well, I was at New York Comic Con this year. Yeah, I hope to do that again next year. I don't know. I mean, San Diego, I think it depends on what's happening with COVID. I know at New York Comic Con, like a lot of publishers didn't go this year. So I'm waiting just to see like what happens, like as far as like, attendance.
I know Marvel and DC have started doing their own, their own event sort of thing, weekends, mostly online, and that's when they're doing all their new trailers and panels and things like this. They're doing their own sort of weekends. Have been for the last couple of years. Obviously, the hope is that they'll get back because New York and San Diego are so massive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I hope they do too.
How was New York with how did, because that's in my head, New York's probably the second or third largest convention there is. What was COVID protocol or that like? Was it quite a safe environment to be in?
I mean, you had to be there were you had to have like vaccinated. I don't think you needed a negative test. It was just like vaccinated, and then you got like an armband for being vaccinated. And then I mean, the main thing is it just wasn't at the big publishers weren't there. Artist Alley seemed pretty similar though than other years. I mean, there were some advantages because it wasn't wall to wall people, so you could actually go around. You could have conversations with people. It was a little more intimate in that way, but it wasn't like the chaos of like a typical Comic-Con. And I think some of the sellers, book sellers and comic sellers, just felt like they weren't making enough money. Because there just weren't enough people there. So I think it was better for actually the fans who came. If you're there to network, it was really good.
Yeah.
Because sometimes at a Comic-Con, like the big ones, it's so big. So for somebody like me, it was like an opportunity to actually talk to some editors. But as far as selling stuff, like I think there was a lot of disappointment.
It's kind of like we went to myself and Colin. We went to Thought Bubble, which is the sort of it's one of the bigger independent. It sort of focuses primarily on independent comic creators rather than, and they'll bring in like they brought in James Tynion and Cecil and I'm trying to think who else they brought in. So they'll bring in bigger names. We were supposed to have I always forget his name. I can't pronounce his second name. Chuck, the guy that wrote Fight Club.
Oh, Chuck Palahniuk.
Yeah, there you go. He was supposed to be there, and but on sort of the 11th hour, we lost him, and we lost Rebellion, who are probably the biggest or one of the biggest comic publishers. They do 2000 AD and Judge Dredd and things like that.
Yeah,
they were due to be there, and I think they pulled out. So I think. But as a consumer, it was it was slightly less busier than I was expecting, but there was so much still to see. It was I'm just interested to see. We had a guest on last year who who was in Australia and was still doing the comic conventions were still running in Australia because things were so tight. They were able to and then all of a sudden it got super tight, and so it's just interesting seeing it's interesting hearing from yourself and others like how conventions are now that they're back open. I know like Thought Bubble, we all had to be double vaccinated, and we had to have or either double vaccinated or proof of vaccination, and we also had to have we had to be masked.
They were masked. Yeah, they had to be masked. Yeah.
But there was I remember at the time there being quite a lot of controversy around that in England about how wearing, because masks weren't mandatory in public spaces anymore, why, was there going to be an issue with this Comic Con doing it? And there was no issues at all. Like, folks just did it, and it was fine, and it was still a really, really lovely weekend for everybody. It was just quite interesting because we talked about like whether if that convention had happened in other places within the UK, would it had such a positive? Would the response have been as positive? It's just interesting. I like these conversations. What have you got? Have you got anything coming up in the immediate future? Have you got?
Just my novel that's coming out. I'm working on some TV projects. A new novel that I hope to finish over the next couple of months. But yeah, basically focused on this new novel I'm writing.
Cool. That's really exciting. And I've got you at Jason Starr Books on social media.
Follow me, Jason Starr Books on Twitter, Jason Starr Books on Instagram. Follow me. Check out jasonstarr.com. And pre-order my new book. Support a struggling writer.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll hope to see you soon. And thank you everybody that's joined us. I'm just going to check the calendar because I'm really bad at remembering who's Andrew. I don't know what Andrew's doing.
I don't know. One of my devices is switched off, and now my camera's not working. Can you hear me still? I'm still here.
It's quite disconcerting though. Please join us next week where we're hopefully going to be joined by a tag team force in British comics. We're going to have Time Bomb Comics with us, who are previous guests and they're friends of the show. So we should have the guys from Time Bomb Comics joining us, but we should also have the editor of Comic Scene and somebody that's doing massive things for Scottish comics. Atomic, his most recent project, is up on Kickstarter at the moment, and it's the Return of the 80s cult comic. So next week we should have Tony Foster joining us as well. And Andrew's joining. Hopefully, Andrew will be joining us too. Join us next week where we'll have the team of Comic Scene and Time Bomb in the same podcast, and it should be good fun because they're pals. So it might actually just be that we can say, "Good evening. Here's Time Bomb. Here's Comic Scene."
There could be too many people speaking.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Well, thank you again, Jason. And cheers. Cheers, guys. Have a lovely weekend.